They were promised a comfortable living driving for Lyft, but now some drivers who joined Lyft's rental car program are struggling to make ends meet, and some are even living out of the vehicles they rent. LA Times tech reporter Johanna Bouillon looked into why drivers in the Express Drive program are running on empty. Hi, Johanna. Nice to see you today.
Good to see you, too.
I want you to start, as you did the piece, by telling us the story of a man named Chris Berry.
He moved to Tennessee, left his small hometown after struggling for years to find a steady income. And he did that because he saw an advertisement that basically said that you can make a good living on Lyft. And in fact, we'll actually give you a car that qualifies to drive for Lyft's platform. So he packed up everything, sold his vehicle in order to help fund the move, and then moved to Tennessee. He had accommodations planned when he moved there, but those fell through. And for a few months, he was living out of the car that he rented from Lyft. But he found that because of the high weekly rent, which for him was about $240 a week, and the low pay, Lyft pays drivers who rent cars through them less per mile than all other drivers, he wasn't able to save enough up to afford another apartment. And then one day he accidentally or mistakenly parked his car overnight in front of a business, and it was towed. So he had to go retrieve that vehicle. And when he did, in addition to being charged the weekly rent, Lyft also charged him a towing fee, and one that he was not given any notice about. It didn't come into his bill until a week or so later. So he was really surprised by this and had not planned and hadn't budgeted for that towing fee. And as a result, he wasn't able to pay that towing fee off, and Lyft asked for his car back. And because it was his shelter, he's still holding on to that vehicle until he can raise enough money to get another car.
The cost of renting that car and paying for the insurance, it's very, very hard to cover that with the number of miles most people drive a week, right?
I've spoken to a number of drivers who are full-time drivers, and they actually really enjoy the program. But they themselves caution that this is not a program that's designed for people who are part-time drivers. And they say it's incredibly hard to get 95 rides a week, which helps them cut down on the cost of rent. So for drivers who are financially insecure and are looking to this not just for an access to income, but for shelter, the program, the way that it's structured, has made it incredibly difficult for them to get ahead. And part of that is because Lyft takes the rent from their account at the beginning of the week. And so drivers have to spend the first 2 days or 2 to 3 days of the week just covering the rent. So they have no income until they cover that rent. One driver who I spoke to, because he was overdrawing on his account to pay for gas because he was still paying off the rent, he had to skip certain meals, or he typically would try to pay for $25 to sleep in a Korean spa. And there are a couple in LA that allow for overnight guests. But on days that he was covering the rent, he could not afford that. So he was forced to sleep in his car.
Well, part of the problem, too, is that Lyft is sort of selling this thing as, hey, we're here to help you drive for us. And it's really, really flexible. They're not saying you need to be full-time or more in order to cover all the cost. How many people are in this boat?
There's not really a way to quantify that. That's not Lyft. Those aren't the numbers that obviously Lyft is providing to us. But they contend that the program is not designed for everyone, and you can get out of it in as little as 7 days. And that's certainly true. But again, to your point, it's not advertised to drivers that way. It's advertised to drivers as this really easy way to get access to this flexible source of income.
You say in your piece that it's cheaper to rent a car through a dealership and pay the insurance than to go through Lyft's own program, right?
It can be. One driver we spoke to in Los Angeles who finances her vehicle pays a total of $540 a month, and that includes the cost of insurance. Drivers who are renting through Lyft in Los Angeles are paying $1,000 a month, and that also includes the cost of insurance. And the catch here is, it's kind of interesting, Lyft says that the weekly rental, which is incredibly expensive, covers and includes the cost of insurance. And yet they justify paying drivers who rent through them less than all other drivers by saying it's due to the cost of insurance. So it doesn't really track. It can't be both. They can't both be covered, but also, drivers being paid less because of it.
Is this a profit profit generator for the bottom line for investors, or is this something that they're willing to take a hit on in order to encourage more drivers?
The revenue in 2016 and 2017 were negligible. They themselves have also said that this isn't meant to be a program that they break even on. But now that they're publicly traded, and they do not expect to turn a profit in the short term, investors are paying attention to just growth. And that's what they're looking at. And in order to show growth, they have to increase their supply of drivers. And what this program does, and on the one hand, it offers access to this income to drivers who otherwise would not have that access. But for Lyft and Uber, what it does is it opens up this pool of drivers that they would otherwise not be able to use for their platform.
Right. And Uber actually bailed out of its company called Exchange and sold it, saying they were losing $9,000 per vehicle.
Yeah, it is not an inexpensive program, and I think Lyft knows that. And so Lyft and Uber both operate this sort of partner situation, and part of that is to offset the cost of having these vehicles on their balance sheet.
All right, Johanna, what an interesting story. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
In LA County, Safe Parking LA secures lots for people living out of their vehicles. The program's director says more than a fifth of the 250 applicants each quarter are under 40 years old and working full time, and that includes Uber and Lyft drivers. It's estimated more than 15,000 people sleep in their vehicles in LA County alone.